This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by Firefly Books, and with you being a sports fan just like me, here's 2 suggestions for your next great sports read. If you love basketball, then you need to add Dave Zarum's book, NBA 75, The Definitive History. Uncover untold stories of triumph, controversy, and the greatest stars of the game. From the league's humble beginnings to its modern glory, it is a courtside seat to 75 years of NBA history. And if you're a golf fanatic, then you gotta check out Matt Adams' book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget. I've used it as a reference in this podcast over the past year for lots of stories that I've done, and I can tell you from experiencing it, this is a great book. Relive 50 of golf's most memorable moments through the eyes of the legends themselves. It's the closest you'll ever get to walking the fairways with the greatest to ever play the game. Grab your copy of NBA 75 or The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, available from Firefly, wherever you get your books. It's July 14th, and on this day in 1949, Czechoslovakian athlete Jaroslav Drobny defected. Who's Jaroslav Drobny, you may be asking? He's a pretty interesting dude, it turns out. Consider for a moment seeing Wayne Gretzky hoisting the Stanley Cup in June, and then a month later accepting the Silver Gilt Cup as the winner of Wimbledon. Or how surprised would you be if you watched Roger Federer win the US Open, and then a month or so later lace up the skates and hit the ice in the NHL? It's hard to imagine, right? Especially in today's era of sports specialization. But Jaroslav Drobny was just such an athlete. He took up tennis as a young kid in Prague and played in his first Wimbledon in 1938 as a representative of the Czech Republic. He made it to the men's singles semifinal match in both 1947 and 1948 and was part of the men's doubles winning team at the French in 1948. He was part of the Czech Davis Cup team that made it to the semis in both 1947 and 48. He was also part of the Czechoslovakian ice hockey team that won the 1947 World Ice Hockey Championships. But he wasn't just a member of that team, he actually scored the most goals in the tournament. His athleticism wasn't just limited to those sports. One anecdote detailed how after just a single golf lesson, he went out and shot a 78, a score that many amateur golfers dream about and chase their entire lives. He was selected to play in a field hockey game as a teen and promptly scored 7 goals and was immediately put on the national team for their next match. He was celebrated by the government and was used as the poster boy for all things good about communism's ideal of developing strong, athletic men. You see, Drobny had come of age first under the oppressive German occupation of Czechoslovakia during World War II, and then after the war lived behind the Iron Curtain under Russian rule. Even though, by the harsh standards of communist control, he did live a pretty good life behind the curtain. He was given a car, housing, a job, and he was placed on a pedestal for all to admire his athletic ability. Drobny called it the cheapest available form of propaganda. In early 1949, he was summoned to Moscow and told to bring every piece of sports equipment he owned. He endured meetings with party officials, intent on establishing a Russian sports program aimed at competing in the Olympics. These were not happy affairs, but instead intense meetings with hardline communist officials who wanted to dominate the world of sport like they had dominated Eastern Europe in the war. He was thrust into social events with heavy drinking members of the Politburo. He was poked, prodded, and pressed for information. He became disenchanted with the oppressiveness in the country, and so he hatched a plan. Against instructions of the Russian government, Drobny and his doubles partner Vladimir Chernik went to Switzerland to play in a tournament. Drobny was really not seen as a threat to defect. He didn't have any relatives in other parts of the world, and he had no connection with any other country. And he traveled light to Switzerland. But with the equivalent of $50 in his pocket, a few clothes that he'd brought with him to play tennis in, and a toothbrush, Drobny defected. He initially reached out to the Swiss government, the US government, and the Australian government for asylum, but he was refused by each. Egypt finally stepped up and offered him citizenship. His choice to defect did have ramifications, though. No Czech tennis player was allowed to travel to the West to play any tournaments for the following 5 years. Drobny went on to win the French singles title in 1951 and 52, the Wimbledon singles title in 54. In all, he won 147 singles titles throughout his tennis career. The Boston Bruins offered him a $20,000 contract to play with them in the 50s and become the first European to play in the NHL, but he turned it down, deciding to maintain his amateur status and concentrate on his tennis instead. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. I'm a big fan of shave soap. I've been using different brands for years, and I recently gave Sterling's shave soaps a try, and I've been very happy with the results. Sterling's shave soaps give you a great lather and a frictionless feel that allows the razor to glide right over the skin for a super close shave. No skin irritation and a clean, refreshing feel with no soapy residue after. I can tell you without a doubt, it's simply the best shave I've ever had. And my wife has noticed too. And here's the thing. With the ability to purchase 1-ounce sample pucks, you can try out different scents to find the right one for you. Give Sterling Soap a try today. Visit sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. On this day in 1970, it was a collision that has been talked about for more than 50 years and probably will be for another 50. Pete Rose and Ray Fosse met for the first time the night before the Major League Baseball All Star game. They were introduced to each other by Sam McDowell, who was pitching for Cleveland. Now, Sudden Sam, as he was called by his friends, was a good friend of Rose and a teammate to Fosse. It was a cordial meeting. They ended up having dinner together with their wives. Later, Fosse and his newlywed bride, Carol, went back to Pete and Carol in Rose's house to talk baseball and have a few drinks. It was All-Star weekend, so they could release a little pressure and enjoy the moment. Riverfront Stadium had opened just a few weeks prior, and it was set to host the 1970 All-Star game. Fosse, a 23-year-old first-time All-Star, was awestruck. He said it was like his baseball card collection had come to life, and he tried to soak it in as much as he could around future Hall of Famers. He peppered Rose with questions about his teammate, Johnny Bench. Since Fosse was a catcher with the Cleveland Indians, he didn't get a chance to see Bench play much, and he had a lot of questions. The night ended around 1 a.m., and the Fosses went back to their hotel in preparation for the All-Star game the next night. Now, that night had been fun. Maybe they could get together with the Roses again sometime soon. But Ray Fosse's second meeting with Pete Rose would be anything but cordial. The American Leaguers were looking pretty good on this night. It looked like they would break a 7-game losing streak to the Nationals, holding a 4-1 lead in the bottom of the ninth. With Oakland's Catfish Hunter on the mound, surely it was a done deal. But Catfish could not close the door. First, a solo homer by Dick Deitz. Willie McCovey singled home another, and then when Roberto Clemente lifted a sac fly to the outfield to score another one, it was tied at 4 and heading to extra innings. And it stayed that way into the bottom of the 12th. With 2 outs, Rose was on second, representing the winning run. Jim Hickman was at the plate.
And right into the stretch, looking back and throws up the middle. Rose is on his way around, picked up by Otis. Rose is coming to the plate, throws a throw. He's in. It's all over. The National League wins.
So, as a sports fan, you've probably seen this play 1,000 times, maybe 1,000,000. Well, as Fosse stepped to catch the ball and tag Pete, Rose barreled into him full speed, shoulder to shoulder. Rose tagged the plate, ball game over. National League wins 5-4 for their 8th straight All-Star game victory. Now, Rose was unapologetic after the game, and he was still unapologetic until his death. His quote after the game was, "Nobody told me they changed it to girls softball between third and home." After the play, Fosse was holding his left arm, and he was taken to the hospital, but according to an article that he wrote, there was no indication of a break or separation on the x-ray. Years later, Fosse actually believed that Rose had been intentionally trying to hurt him. Rose said that simply was not true.
Ray is reaching out for the ball, and the ball's about this far from him, and you can't concentrate on two things at the same time. You either got to concentrate on the runner, or you got to concentrate on catching the ball. And I just happened to hit him before he got the ball. I wasn't trying to hurt nobody.
Rose went on to say that his dad was sitting in the front row that night, and Rose feared what his dad's reaction would be if he tried to avoid contact and slide into home plate and was tagged out. The All Star game was important to these guys, and Rose was as competitive a guy as there ever was. Fosse actually did not miss a game. He was in a ton of pain, and he couldn't swing the bat very well, but he actually caught the very next game for the Indians after the All Star break. Rose actually missed 3 games because of the collision. Fosse went on to play another 7 years, and he was an All-Star in '71 when the American League finally broke the National League stranglehold on the game. Rose played in 17 All-Star games, and he was on the winning end of 16 of them, but no matter how many he won, people will always remember his collision with Ray Fosse that happened on this day in 1970. On this day in 1972, it was a family affair at the ballpark. It's always great to go to a baseball game with the family, get box seats, maybe if it's a special occasion. But really, even if you're sitting in the outfield bleacher seats, those are just fine as long as you're with the ones you love, right? Well, on this day, a pair of brothers had about as good a view of the ball game as you could possibly get. The Detroit Tigers were playing at home against the Kansas City Royals. Tom Haller was behind the plate for the Tigers on this night. His brother Bill was also behind the plate as the umpire. It was the first time that brothers had actually been paired up as umpire and catcher in a Major League ball game. It's hard to say if Tom got any favorable calls that night. The Royals struck out 10 times to Detroit's 5. Kansas City went on to win the game 1-0, so nepotism didn't extend to a win for the little brother. In 2019, Novak Djokovic outlasted Roger Federer in the longest men's singles final in Wimbledon history. This was the first year that a final set tiebreak was actually used in the men's singles finals, but it wasn't the typical tiebreak that is initiated at 6-6 in a set. In the final set, the tiebreak would be implemented only if it got to 12-12. If there had not been a tiebreak in place to decide it, who knows how long this one would have lasted. Djokovic's 3-set wins all came on tiebreaks. Djokovic actually stared down 2 championship points only to fight back to win the game and stave off defeat. When Federer hit one off the frame at 6-3 in the tiebreak of the 5th set, Djokovic had successfully defended his Wimbledon title in 4 hours, 57 minutes. It was the last major final appearance for Federer, who won Wimbledon 8 times. On this day in 2013, Jordan Speith became the youngest player to win a PGA Tour event in 82 years. It was the John Deere Classic in Illinois, and after Speith holed out from the bunker on 18 to close out his final round 65, he found himself in a 3-way tie for first and in a sudden death playoff. Spieth said later that his bunker shot was the luckiest shot he had ever hit in his life, but at least his luck did not run out. The sudden death playoff went 5 extra holes before Spieth could best defending champion Zach Johnson and David Hearn. At 19, Spieth became the youngest player to win on tour since Ralph Goodall won the Santa Monica Open in 1931. And it was on this day in 1966 when Cleveland Browns running back Jim Brown told Browns owner Art Modell to take this job and shove it. I talked about this a few months back when I mentioned the release date of the Dirty Dozen. Brown had been in England in the summer of '66 filming the movie, and it was running a bit long. Modell had wanted Brown back in Cleveland for the start of training camp and said if he wasn't back by July 17th, he would fine Jim for each day missed and possibly suspend him. So after playing 9 stellar years in the NFL, Brown decided to retire instead, giving up his $80,000 salary for the season and concentrate on being an actor and a social justice warrior. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. The McMurdo Dry Valley in Antarctica is the driest place on Earth. It is the planet's largest desert and has no liquid water. The McMurdo area has not had any rainfall in more than 2 million years.
What did you say?
And the McMurdo Valley is the closest replication of Mars's surface on our planet. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.